Hello everyone. Today we are going to discuss about mosquito-borne infections and their control. That is control of mosquitoes themselves. So as far as the other classes have gone, we have already discussed about the other vectors like Kala-Azar, like filaria, etc. So today we shall be concentrating on mosquito-borne infections only. But before that, I shall do a brief recap of arthropods and what are they. Actually, arthropods are a group of organisms which you may say that they are the earliest types of organisms known to man, uh, which can fly. So these are these have some peculiar features like uh, they have got joint feet, and from that only they have obtained their name. Arthro means joint, poda means feet. They have got some specific characteristics. They have got a bilaterally symmetric body, segmented body. They have got an exoskeleton made of chitin which is protecting them, and they have got jointed appendages. Now regarding arthropods, there are several subspecies, genera, etc. But we shall take the common names only because we are not going to into the details of that. We shall be taking insecta that consists of mosquitoes, sandfly, housefly, fleas, arachnida which contains ticks, mites, and among the mosquitoes, medically important mosquitoes are, as you know, Culex, Aedes, Mansonia, and Anopheles. Let's come to some of the diseases caused by this group of organisms. Firstly, Anopheles. They cause malaria and lymphatic filariasis. They are the vectors of malaria and lymphatic filariasis. It is caused by Plasmodium species and Brugia timori. The Culex again causes lymphatic filariasis. This time it is caused by Escherichia branckofti, West Nile fever. Culex. Culex vishnui causes Japanese encephalitis with a flavivirus. Mansonia causes lymphatic filariasis. This time the organism is Brugia malai, and Aedes causes yellow fever and dengue and chikungunya, as you may be aware of. Now, instead of going into the details of structure of mosquitoes and the difference between them, we shall be touching upon some more important aspects which is pertinent to public health. Of course, the structure of mosquitoes, their life cycles, etc., are an important part, and you can go through them in your book only. But for vector management or vector control, the facts we need are more of mosquito bionomics and how it tackles with the environment. That is, we have to know the habits and habitats of mosquito. Where do they thrive? Where do they fly? What do they eat? Where do they rest? To attack them. And we shall be touching only the salient points which are important with regards to mosquito control. There are obviously other factors, other uh, characteristics also, uh, but I am just touching upon the salient points for this class. Firstly, about mosquito bionomics. So, most of you are hearing this name for the first time, bionomics. What is bionomics? As you may have guessed, bionomics is that part of the science of entomology which deals with the, like, what should I say, upbringing of the mosquito. That is how the mosquito behaves in the environment. So this bionomics is, on one hand, it is a very important part, and I shall tell you some stories also which will make these things more interesting for you. Now, The climatic factors play an important part in species distribution, behavior, survival, and vectorial status. There are many climatic factors like water, air, temperature, rainfall, light. I am not going into each of these in detail because there has been hundreds and thousands of work on at what temperature the mosquito thrives, at what rainfall it thrives, but I am going to the salient points only as I already mentioned. Regarding water, there are some mosquitoes which like running water. There are some mosquitoes which like standing water. Water may be clean or polluted, sweet or brackish, shaded or sunlit, and according to that, the specific breed of mosquito breeds. Actually, mosquito, if you can recall, the adult mosquito is only airborne. The egg, larva, pupa are water, like they live in water only. So this water is an important part of the mosquito bionomics. Also, temperature is another important part because there are some mosquitoes which thrive at particular temperature. Now, an optimum range of water temperature is required for the growth of immature stages of mosquitoes. The range is lower for species living in temperate than in tropical zones, and mosquitoes breeding in tropical zones usually breed at 23 to 27 degrees Celsius. A very important point is that moderately frequent rainfall usually increases the opportunity for prolific breeding. This is a very important part, and you can think of it logically also. Like if there is continuous rain, then the water will not be stagnant, it will be always flowing. And if the water is flowing, then probably the mosquito will not get a good stagnant settlement to thrive. But again, if the rainfall is not at all there, the mosquito cannot thrive. The egg larva, it cannot be there. So moderate rainfall, off and on rainfall are the ideal time for the mosquitoes to grow. You can well appreciate the fact that the onset of dengue starts pre-monsoon and it continues post-monsoon. Because of this, whether rainfall is not continuous or rainfall has become lighter. There are some other factors which I would like to mention also. There are some particular mosquitoes which prefer swamps and shallow temporary rainwater pools like Anopheles gambiae. Again, Anopheles funestus likes to breed in clear water. Also, Anopheles sundaicus and Q fasciatus breeds in highly polluted water. Again, there is this classical example of Mansonia larvae, which is preferring a freshwater lettuce known as Pistia to grow. Aedes simpsoni likes to grow in banana plants. So these examples are all there, but the most important thing you should remember is that Aedes aegypti, the dreadful mosquito which is causing dengue, it prefers clean and stagnant water in household areas. And where do they get this water? In coconut husks, in flower pots, old tins, tires, etc. So this is the part which is very important for us regarding public health. Now I am coming to another type, another important example. Like uh, these are the things I have already mentioned, so I am not going into details of this. Now I am coming to the environment and the habits of adult mosquito. The first part is I would like to mention is mating habits of mosquito. Usually, mating occurs 24 to 48 hours after emergence, and that is also very species specific. There, there is swarming of mosquitoes present. The females enter the swarm, are seized, and the pair drops out of the swarm. After insemination, the spermatozoa are stored in the female mosquito in an organ called spermatheca and drawn on for fertilization of all eggs produced to the remainder of its life. With regards to this, I would like to mention that a term known as extrinsic incubation period or EIP. That is the time taken by the mosquito to reach that stage where it can infect a human being outside the human body. So there is an intrinsic incubation period which is after the plasmodium gets inserted into the body, the time taken for it to produce symptoms, and there is an extrinsic incubation period which is after the mosquito eats the blood meal, the time taken by it to reproduce and again pass it on to another human. The more rainier the season is, this EIP or extrinsic incubation period starts getting shorter and shorter because of the reasons already mentioned, because this mating occurs first, this maturation of mosquitoes occurs first, etc. Now I am coming to another part known as dispersal of mosquito. This dispersal of mosquito is the time taken by the mosquito, sorry, it is the distance flown by the mosquito from its place of biting. The adult mosquitoes do not usually fly a great distance, and the male is a much weaker flyer than the female. Thus, the presence of a large number of adult male mosquitoes indicates that breeding place of that particular species are close by. In normal atmospheric circumstances, they can flow up to 1 to 3 km, although some species can flow further. In certain temperate zones, it travels 4 to 5 kilometers. Also, strong winds can carry them much further. Now, regarding dengue, the Aedes mosquito cannot fly very far. So, when whether whatever is the place of dengue hotspot, you can be rest assured that the breeding places are near the place only. So, it makes our job easier to trace the breeding place. Next is the biting habit. This is very interesting. The mosquitoes are cold-blooded arthropods and they are physiologically ill-fitted to withstand very dry environments. So they seek their host in a warm and humid environment. They usually try to bite in the dawn or in the dusk or in the night time. Daytime biting occurs in very less number of mosquitoes. So in these times the humidity is the highest, and also if you can remember in pre-monsoon and post-monsoon, due to the high humidity, the Aedes bites. About host preference, there are two type terms you have to remember. Firstly is anthrophilic, another is zoophilic. Anthrophilic is they're preferring man to bite, and zoophilic they're preferring any animal to bite. Also, seasonal preference is there, like Culex pipiens hibernate in sheltered places such as cellars of outbuildings, surviving on body fat. Now, there is another term I would like to tell you, that is the resting habits. This is very, again, very interesting. It, uh, what should I say it, makes the policies. There are some mosquitoes like Anopheles which are endophagous, that is, they bite inside the rooms, and endophilic, that is, they live inside the room also. So we are more worried about the endophagous mosquitoes in urban area because they will enter the room and bite. But as you can well appreciate the fact that suppose in case of Japanese encephalitis, Culex vishnui, they are exophagous. They can bite in the rice fields, paddy fields, etc. Also in northeastern states, the male vectors of malaria are exophagous and exophilic also. That is, in the forest areas, they will be present in larger numbers. Now, after biting, the mosquitoes which are heavier, which are not very aerodynamically well suited, they want to rest, and then they go to the walls and rest, and then after their weight gets reduced, they will fly out of the window. On the other hand, some mosquitoes bite and then they fly straight out. There are some mosquitoes which prefer to live inside the house in dark areas like Aedes. Now, this helps in devising policies because in case of malaria outbreak, the mosquito is Anopheles. So, in case of that, as they will rest on the wall after biting, so we can use something known as IRS or insecticide residual sprays on the walls. These residual sprays have residual effects. The chemicals have residual effects, that is, they have their effects for a long time. So whenever the mosquito is sitting on the wall for resting, they are contact poison, they contaminate the mosquito and kills it. On the other hand, we cannot use this IRS for dengue because Aedes mosquitoes do not sit on the wall. They either rest in the darker areas of the house, like behind the windows, behind the uh, pardas, and in the below the tables, chairs, etc. Or they will fly outside. They will not rest on the wall. So giving this IRS is not very useful for them. So now you can well appreciate the fact that how the habits of mosquito helps in devising our program. Now I am coming to the malaria vectors. The main vectors of malaria are Anopheles culiaceus, Anopheles fluviatilis, Anopheles minimus, Anopheles philippicensis. Among them, Stephensi diras have been considered as the principal vectors of malaria. Diras is found in the northeastern states. Now I am coming to an interesting story of Anopheles diras and Anopheles minimus. Again, these Anopheles diras and minimus, these mosquitoes are the main vectors of malaria in the northeastern states. And regarding them, the same story also applies. What story? That is, they are both susceptible to commonly used insecticides like DDT. Now, if indoresidual insecticide is properly sprayed during transmission, the malaria endemicity can be controlled and interruption of transmission can be achieved. In villages which are close to forest, Anopheles diras transmits malaria may not be possible for IRS. Diras has an exophilic vector, and although a poor flyer, taking blood meal, it leaves the human dwelling to rest outside. This vector has got insecticide sprayed this contact with the insecticide sprayed indoors in human dwellings. On the other hand, Anopheles minimus strong fire rests indoor because it takes a lot of blood meal, more, around 3 times Anopheles dirus, and so it cannot go outside, it cannot fly, so it will rest on the wall, and so IRS is effective against that. So these are some of the facts which uh, how the habits of the mosquitoes help us devising the control programs. Now we have discussed something about Anopheles. Now we are coming to the dengue vectors. I am skipping the filaria vectors because you can read it in your book also, and it is like there is no interesting story regarding dengue vectors. Aedes aegypti is the most important epidemic vector, but other species like Albopictus, Polynesiensis, etc. are also considered as secondary vectors. As I already mentioned that it is a day biting mosquito and prefers to rest in dark and find dark areas inside the house. The another very important thing about Aedes which I failed to mention is that the eggs are very resistant to drying. That is, after laying eggs, suppose that has become dry. Even then, the eggs can stay there for a long time, for over a year. So whenever the favorable time will again come, whenever the rainfall will occur, that egg can hatch and develop the mosquitoes. So what does this teach us? This teaches that we have to be very careful about these collections of water. If there's some collection of water, if possible, we have to damage them, break them, like power plots, old tires, etc. And in the case we cannot do that, like in case of constructions, we have to be very careful in controlling the amount of water in them regularly, because even if it is dry, it doesn't ensure that there is no Aedes eggs inside that. Now I am coming to the important part which may have already heard, that is integrated vector management. Integrated vector management is a rational decision making procedure to optimize the use of resources for vector control. Now let us come to this very carefully. What is this? It is a rational decision making procedure to optimize the use of resources for vector control. So as we already know that resources are always limited. Manpower, the spray machines, the spraying chemicals, money, etc. They're all limited, and we should also mention the time factor. So a limited number of persons have to do the spraying with limited number of machines and limited number of insecticides. So we shall, based on science, arrange them in such a manner that we can optimize them or maximize their output. It requires a management approach that improves the efficacy, cost effectiveness, ecological soundness, and sustainability of vector control. Now, integrated vector management, why it is known as integrated? Because do not only think about this as some person entering a room and spraying something. This requires a lot of other activities, like there has to be environmental manipulation or modification, which I shall talk about soon. There has to be a biological control. There has to be a huge amount of IC. That is, there has to be like publicity that some people are coming for spraying. People has to understand to use the personal protective equipments. If mosquito nets are given to them, they have to know that they have to use them. So there is a large amount of IC which has to be done, and this requires a huge quantity of intersectoral coordination. If you go to the villages and look at the or in the urban area for dengue control, the corporation or the municipality works with the health staff, works with the local NGOs, clubs, works with the local religious leaders in some places, works with the local construction workers in some places for managing this. So this becomes a huge task. So for this convergence of all activities, this is known as integrated vector management. Now I'm coming to the first part of integrated vector management, which is known as environmental management. Environmental management essentially means improved water supply. That is, you have to tell the people to change the waters at least once in 7 days so that water doesn't collect. And where is the 7 days come? It is the EIP of extrinsic incubation period of dengue vector. So if you change the water 7 days, then the time required for the adult to lay the eggs and to hatch the eggs is covered. In some areas, there can be mosquito proofing of overhead tanks, that is, covering of the tanks can be there. You're getting flower pots, either you can break them or a hole can be made inside them so that the water drains off. Regarding coolers, this is a very important part in places like Delhi, Haryana, etc. They have coolers for summer and the water collects in a particular place which is quite hard to reach. So nowadays manufacturers are making such coolers so that this water gets drained off by some pipes and it doesn't collect. There has to be regular building inspection by the corporation workers, especially in case of buildings which are being in progress, because there everything is in a very chaotic situation. There are a lot of crevices and cracks where the water can collect. Solid waste disposal has to be top class, because again the solid waste disposal like tins, cans, tires, etc., they can be a harbor for collection of water and thus proliferation of mosquito vectors. I can tell you two stories. One is regarding Bangalore. In Bangalore, the corporation, the municipality, in the dividers of the road, they made flower pots throughout so that they can harvest flowers in them. But as always with our government, they did not harvest any flowers in them and they were kept as such after construction for a pretty long time. So what happened? There was a huge outbreak of dengue, especially around that area, because dengue mosquitoes do not fly much. And while tracing, it was found that in those flower pots there was a huge amount of egg count. Also in Delhi, there was such a outbreak of dengue just on the outskirts of Delhi, where there were a lot of old tires which were kept outside. So now you know how these factors work hand to hand with epidemiology. Next, I would like to talk about personal protections, like the protections you are taking. The first and foremost is personal clothing or protective clothing. The schools often tell that their watch should be sent with a full sleeve shirt during a dengue outbreak time. Many persons in the offices also prefer to wear full sleeve shirts. Besides, mats, coils, aerosols all act to repel these mosquitoes or aerial mosquitoes. Some people use repellents on their body, but the most important personal protection one can use is mosquito nets. Now, these mosquito nets, people often think that dengue mosquitoes bite in the morning only, but it has been seen that it is not the case. It may bite in the dawn time also, or the dusk time also. So, for protecting in the dawn time, mosquito nets is an useful way of preventing the bites. In some areas, the past people have been provided with something known as insecticide treated bed nets or ITNs, which have got the additional effect of an IRS along with a mosquito net. Next, I am coming to biological control. Larvivorous fish can be harvested in places where this engineering works cannot be done, like Gambusia affinis, Poecilia reticulata, guppy fish, etc. These fishes have got a peculiar feature that even their eggs tend to remain a long time even if the water is not there, and they prefer the mosquito larva for eating, but they take a long time to grow. So for immediate control they are not a very good measure. Also, experiments are being done with two endotoxin producing bacteria like Bacillus thuringiensis serotype H14 and Bacillus severicus. But rather than biological control, the more important control is the chemical control. Now, chemical control, there is another story. The story is that there can be chemicals to control the larva and also the adults. So, suppose we know that for a disease like dengue, there are some specific areas of water collection where the eggs can be seen. So, it is good to spray the larvicides. We use larvicides like Temefos. So recently, insect growth regulators like difluorobenzuron, pyriproxyfen are also used. But remember Temefos as the primary larvicide, which is used by our corporation. But do you think that in case of dengue, we can use space sprays or the like fogging of the entire air with spraying to kill the adult mosquitoes? I don't think so, because as I mentioned, dengue mosquitoes are endophilic, that is, they live inside the house, inside in the darker areas. They are very photophobic. So even if you spray outside, what will happen? Whatever mosquitoes were outside will come inside. People will get a false sense of relief that every mosquito has been killed, but the dengue mosquito is still, the Aedes mosquito is still there inside your house. Also, IRS is not effective for killing dengue mosquitoes or Aedes mosquitoes because, as I mentioned, they do not rest on the walls. So, space sprays can be used for dengue outbreaks only in very limited cases where there is a large visible pool of Aedes adult mosquitoes which can be seen. On the contrary, for malaria control, IRS techniques can be used. IRS is done by DDT, malathion, etc. in places where the API or the annualized parasite index is more than 2. So today I am stopping my discussion here. Hope you had a very interesting class. In case of any queries, you can mail me in my email ID. Thank you.